and he is a star, a legend, Chester Burton Atkins.
Thank you, Ralph. Very nice to be here with you.
How you doing, Chester?
Better known as Chet, of course.
How are you? You have no health problems?
No, I'm getting along pretty good. I don't feel badly much, just when I fly. It takes me a little while to rest up after I fly a lot. So I'm feeling good. I haven't been on the road in a few days.
You still tour all the time?
No, I don't. I go out about 1 or 2 weekends a month, go out and get some money and bring it back.
What was it Marty Robbins used to compare country singers with Jesse James? He said, you ride in, you get the money, and you ride out.
That's right. That's about what it amounts to.
Chet, you always had a hard time with that word star, haven't you?
Yeah, I never have figured that I'm a real star because I don't sing, you see. And to be a star, you've got to sing. And I can always tell when I'm hot because when I go into town, people say, what are you going to sing tonight, Mr. Atkins? I can't wait to hear you. And I can tell right then that I'm hot, But that's the way it is. I'm kind of a semi-well-known, and it has its advantages, though. It's nice to be in that category.
Well, I must tell you that you are known all over the world, and perhaps you know that.
Well, if you jog people's memory and said he did this and he did that, and they say, oh, yes, I think I know who you're talking about.
I was in Paris, France last summer, and I picked up the Paris Herald American, which is an English newspaper, and they had a picture of Chet Atkins in there.
Yeah, there's a boy in France that plays the style I play. Marcel Dadi is his name, and so he's popularized my name over there quite a bit.
Well, let's talk about your new album, and for those who see it, and we hope all of you will, it says Chet Atkins, CGP, little letters looks like letters that a doctor might add to his name, or a dentist. What does CGP stand for?
Well, that's a little thing I put on there, and it's kind of a secret, really.
I know what it means.
Oh, do you? Okay. Stands for country guitar player. I put that after my signature when I sign autographs, and everybody says, what's that? What's that? And I say, oh, you figure it out.
Chet Atkins has had some rather traumatic things happen to him in the past 12 months. You were at RCA for 35 years, weren't you, Chet?
Something like that.
And, figuring from 1947 to 1982, that's how I came up with that figure.
Yeah.
And you have since left RCA and gone to CBS. I find that rather hard to believe.
Well, it wasn't traumatic at all. It was a very happy occasion. I asked to be let out of my contract at RCA, and they agreed because they didn't want any unhappy artists. And so I had shopped around and found out there were several labels I could go with. And the reason I did it, Ralph, was because of enthusiasm at other labels for my music. I think anytime you stay around a label as long as I was at RCA, people get kind of used to you, and they're not too excited about the product you put out. And so I had to do something about that. I was very sorry to have to do it, but I did it.
They were taking you for granted.
Something like that.
You know, we do that a lot in this town, and I've used you as an example of this. We take a lot of our great performers for granted. I've often said, if I tell you Chet Atkins is a great guitar player, you'll say to me, what else is new? And there are a lot of great people who have vast amounts of talent, but we take them for granted.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Well, now, you did something else, Chet. You not only left RCA, but you also left the Gretsch Guitar Company, and you'd been with them a long time.
Yeah, that happened a couple of years ago. They had a lot of problems. The factory burned down twice, and I really didn't think they were going to get it together again, and so I left them. I hated to do that, but they had been bought out by another company, a conglomerate, and Fred Gretsch had died. I stayed as long as he was alive there, I believe. But I had to leave, I had to make some changes.
So now you represent another guitar company.
Yes, I do.
You have a new guitar.
Yep.
Have you ever gotten over going to the Hall of Fame?
I didn't like that. I didn't want to be in that. But because I figured I was too young. to be in the Hall of Fame. And also I figured they gave it to me because I'd been sick. So
Had you been sick at the time?
Yeah, I had been. And I think they thought I was going to die, so they voted me in.
You mean that's the way to get in the Hall of Fame, is be sick?
Yeah, the sympathy votes count too, you know.
I didn't realize that was tied on to any sickness. I just thought you'd put you in there because it liked you.
No.
Huh?
Sympathy vote.
I don't believe that. That's your interpretation. Of course, I do remember one classic thing you said. Where do you go after you go to the Hall of Fame?
That's right. I figure I got a lot of picking to do, and I don't. When they put you in there, it's like, well, let's forget about him now. Move on to somebody else.
Chet, you've always been apparently a man who just liked initials. I noticed something here the other day in a book that I have found about you. And this is it was your signature as you wrote to your mother. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you remember this. This is a letter reproduced in a book about Chet Atkins. Good news, Mother. I am on a 15-minute program Saturdays, 11 to 11:15, WRBL Columbus. I don't know the kilocycles, but we'll find out. You might pick us up with a powerful set. I know you are glad, so tell all the folks, your son. And then you didn't sign Chet. You wrote your son, CBA.
Yeah, my initials, Chester Burton.
How old were you, Chester?
I was about 14, 15.
Where was WRBL?
Columbus, Georgia.
Is that your first job on the radio?
Wasn't a job. They let me play for nothing. I'd go in and take my guitar and play a few tunes, and got valuable experience, though.
Chester, one of my favorite recordings is a cute little record that you and Dolly Parton made one time. It sounded like you were having a ton of fun. Where you did Do I Ever Cross Your Mind?
That was fun. Dolly is always so much fun to be around. I think that's one of the keys to her success. And we recorded this tune and had a heck of a time doing it. And I didn't know what she was going to bring in. I knew she'd write something. And I think she'd already written this and just thought it would sound good for us to do it. So we did it. And,
is she playing guitar with you here?
Yes.
And there's some reference to that.
Yeah, and she had nails about a half-inch long, and on high fidelity player, you can hear her fingers, nails clicking on the on the fretboard. And at the end, if you'll let the record run long enough, she tells me she loves me.
Oh, I know.
She says, "I love you," hee hee. And I always wanted that on a record.
She give you a big kiss?
I don't think Dolly's ever kissed me. She hugged me a few times, which was nice.
Sure. Care to comment on that?
Sure it was.
Okay. You don't care to comment on that, do you?
No, I mean, you know how Dolly is. She kids all the time.
I know.
Gives you a little hug and moves on.
A little sugar. Chet, I was going to bring up something earlier. When people follow your life, there's one point of confusion. They hear that you're from East Tennessee, up around Knoxville, and then if they get to studying carefully, they notice that you're from Georgia. So where are you from?
I was born in East Tennessee, up above Knoxville, and I left there when I was about 10 years old and went to live with my dad a few years. See, my dad and mother separated when I was about 6. And I had asthma, very bad, and my mother thought I was going to move on to another world somewhere, so she called my dad, and he came up and got me, and I lived with him on a farm down in Georgia for a while. My dad was only married 5 times, so he moved around quite a bit. I lived with him, and he had a nice wife at that time. Stayed down there about 5 years, I guess.
Do you think musicians are a peculiar breed? Are musicians different from other people?
Oh, yes.
How are they different?
Well, I think a lot of them are either introverted or extroverted, one or the other, and most of the time they're introverted, and they express themselves through their music. I know I'm that way, and I know a lot of other artists who are that way. Of course, there are some artists where that doesn't hold true.
You mean shy?
Mm-hmm.
Are you shy?
Oh, yes, painfully shy. Always have been, but I've learned to cover it up, don't you know?
Chet, would it be unfair for me to ask you, a man who has experienced so many wonderful moments in his lifetime, if you could single out your greatest thrill Could you pinpoint that?
I guess the greatest day in my life was when I got a recording contract with a big label, because all of a sudden I had the potential of becoming internationally known instead of just known within the radius of a local radio station. That was a great point in my life. There are other things happened, of course, like when I made an album with Arthur Fiedler. That was a great happening in my life, and it served me very well, and it still helps me all the time, being associated with Arthur Fiedler.
Arthur Fiedler, of course, doubling back to that point, was the director of the Boston Pops Orchestra. And you made a lot of records with him. Made 2 albums with him.
Yeah, I did.
You mentioned earlier you don't like to listen to your records.
I never listen.
Why not?
I don't like to hear myself. I can always hear where I could have done something better, so I get kind of depressed and unhappy when I listen.
You're kidding. Do you hear clunkers in there?
No, I don't hear clunkers. I just hear the way I played something. I think, well, why did I phrase it that way? I should have phrased it another way.
Oh, you're like the Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
Chet, what is this business on the back of your album, I Can't Sleep? Do you have a problem sleeping?
That's a liner I wrote. Yes. I wake up too soon.
What time do you go to bed at night?
About 10.
And you wake up
10,
when?
10, 11. I wake up 4 or 5.
You get up?
Yeah.
Or you just
I
lie
get up
there?
and exercise, yeah.
Then you go back to bed?
No. Sometimes I do.
You get 6 hours a night?
Yeah, about.
I know you told me one time you stopped making records with Elvis Presley because they stayed up all night.
Yeah, he'd come in and he'd start recording at 10. That was my bedtime. So I'd go down and say hello and leave.
Well, now, you did make some records with him.
Yeah, I did.
Did you stay up all night with him at any time?
No, at those sessions we recorded in the afternoon.
Which records did you make with Elvis?
In the first 2 or 3 sessions, it was Heartbreak Hotel and things like that.
Did you know Elvis to be a nice man?
He was very nice. He was. He brought his own friends in with him, his kinfolks and schoolmates and so forth. So he hung out with them between takes and between sessions and so forth. So I didn't. I was not all that close to him, but he was always very nice and respectful to me.
Did he say yes sir, no sir to you?
Yeah, all the time. Yes sir, no sir. And I was just a few years older, but he's a real nice kid.
Of course, by the time Elvis started recording, you were already a legend.
Oh, in my spare time.
Yes. Now, Chet, I have something to play for you I haven't forewarned you about. It is a news actuality that we've discovered, and you're going to have to come up with the answer to the question posed in this presentation.
Is that a musical question?
No. Just listen.
They tell me that our next 2 presenters are 2 of country music's sexiest symbols, and that's okay with me, because I think there's room in this business for all 3 of us. George Strait and Sylvia.
The nominees for Instrumentalist of the Year are Chet Atkins,
Johnny Gimble,
Charlie McCoy,
Hargus Pig Robbins,
Buddy Spiker,
and the winner is
Chet Atkins.
Atkins.
Yeah. Chet's not here tonight, and we accept this award for him. All right, thank you.
Where were you?
Well, I'll tell you, that little incident there and last year makes me believe in miracles. I was looking at some old awards on my wall this morning in the studio, and it dates back to '53. I won a lot of awards as Best Instrumentalist of the Year from various magazines, and I'd been out on the road somewhere. I can't think now where I'd been, and I got in about 5 or 6 o'clock, and I was really beat. So I just didn't go out there. I figured I wouldn't win anyway. And I also, Ralph, I went down there for 9 years. See, I won that award for 3 or 4 years, and then Jerry Reed won it. And I accepted his award, and I took it to the workbench, and I beat the heck out of it with a hammer. I just put all kinds of dents in it and gave it to him. And Pressy didn't appreciate it too much, but Jerry thought it was funny. He said, "Hit it again, Chief." But then I lost for 9 years, and I got tired of going out there and losing. So I said, "I'm not going down there. I'll stay at home." So last year I was back in the bedroom reading, and I heard my wife yell and said, "You won, you won." And this year I was sitting there watching, and I thought, oh, it'd be terrible if I win and I'm not down there to accept. And I won. And as I say, it always ceases to amaze me. It always ceases to amaze me. That's a little joke. No, it'll always amaze me that I won at my age and condition. There's so many young, great players around, and it doesn't really mean that you're the best or anything. It means maybe that you're the best known that year or something. You know, things like that never go to my head, but I'm very grateful and I appreciate it very much, and that's the end of my speech.
I want to mention Merle Travis. I know Merle Travis was a dear friend of yours, and he recently passed away, and you made an album together, and I think the record, Mutual Admiration, says a lot about how you felt about each other. I just wondered if you wanted to comment about Merle Travis.
I really don't, Ralph.
Okay.
I'm not over that yet. I can't talk about it.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to get your side of this. Steve Warner was here. He talked about trying to impress you and taking you to lunch. And turns out that he had left his wallet somewhere and he couldn't pay for the lunch after he took you to lunch.
That's right. He was so embarrassed. But I didn't mind. But you know, after he got a hit record or two going, he was out the house one night and said, "Let's go to dinner." You know, he had a couple of his band members with him, and we went to Jimmy Kelly's, which is a nice, expensive restaurant here in Nashville. And I thought, well, I'll just let him get the check. He's making money now. So he expected to get it anyway, but he started saying, "Oh, I'll get it, Chet." And I didn't say anything. "Oh, that's all right. I'll get it, Chet." I didn't say anything, so he got out a couple of $100 bills and paid it. But he's a funny guy. "I'll get it, Chet," and I never did answer him.
Well, in the other version, he told me that the two of you kept saying, "I'll get it, no, I'll get it, I'll get it." And he suddenly discovered he couldn't get it if he wanted to.
That was the first time we went to lunch, and he said, "I'll get it." And I said, "Oh, I don't know, I'll get it." And he said, "No, I'll get it." He insisted. And then he didn't have his credit card, didn't have any money. And I got it that time. But the next time, he had some hits going. And I never did say, "I'll get it." He said, "Oh, I'll get it," about 3 times.
And you let him have it.
I let him have it.
Tell me a Dolly Parton story.
Dolly Parton story. I talked to her the last time I talked to Dolly, Dolly was on the phone, and I called her about something, and I apologized to her for bothering her. I said, "You know, I won't tell you all the conversation because some of it isn't air conditioned." But I said, "You know, everybody wants a piece of you and all that." And I said, "You're so famous now and everything." And I apologized for bothering her. And she said, "That's all right, honey." Said, "You're a star just like I am." Said, "You were born glittering." Said, "I was born glittering." And said, "All I had to do is develop it." And that will remain with me forever. It was a funny line.
There's a book out about Waylon.
Mm-hmm.
And the book says that you were fired by the Grand Ole Opry.
Yes, I was.
Why were you fired by the Grand Ole Opry?
I wasn't. I don't know what happened there. I had been gone 5 years. And one day I picked up the paper, and they had fired me and Minnie Pearl. And I think there was a fellow there now that's passed on that did some PR for them. And I think he thought it would be good publicity or something to fire me and Marty and
Oh, you think
Minnie.
the story was made up?
Well, it was, because I was never, I hadn't been there. It must have been about 65, because I counted out it had been 5 years. I counted up it had been 5 years. I left in 1960 for no reason except I was so busy recording. I didn't have the energy to go down there on Saturday night, and I just hadn't been there in 5 years. And I pick up the paper and I'm fired. And I thought, well, those dirty dogs, they just did it for the publicity or something. And I always figured that's the reason they did it. I don't know. Because
but when you walked out that night 5 years previous, did you say, "Hey, I'll see you later"?
I don't remember now. I just was working a few spots now and then, and it may have been when the PA show went off the air. I don't know. I was on the PA show, every week. I did a feature on it, and the network.
Prince Albert.
Yeah, and it may have
smoking tobacco.
May have been when that went off. I can't remember, Ralph. But there was no hostilities of any kind. I loved all the people. Jack Stapp, was one of the dearest friends I've ever had, and it's just it wasn't true that I just quit going, and it was an amicable parting. Nobody cared. But then somebody decided I was fired.
I had a fan jump all over me one time. He said, "Why don't y'all ever let Chet Atkins play on that Grand Ole Opry?" I said, "Well, number one, I don't pick the talent for the Opry, but number two, I'm sure that Mr. Atkins can play on the Grand Ole Opry anytime he wants to.
I've played there since then.
All he has to do is pick up the phone and say, 'Hey, I want to come down there.'"
I love the Grand Ole Opry and I love the people that run it and everything. I don't know the people that run it now too well, but I did back in those days. And that was just a guy that was doing a little PR for him, and a certain person that was running it at that time. I don't know. I really never really knew. Some of these days I'm going to ask Minnie Pearl or some of the other people that got fired and see why they did that. But it didn't bother me. I was too busy to be worried about that. Waylon said to me, he said, "Hoss, if you see something getting smaller, it'll be me leaving." That's heavy, Ralph.